welcome to the 22nd Leadership Levers lecture by Riddhi Adlakha on a very interesting topic called customer centricity and digital innovations. And I'm sure you're going to have a very amazingly immersive learning with this topic, because one of the most misused words in customer service realm is definitely the customer centricity. But what we're going to witness today is the kind of insightful journeys, and most importantly, the kind of anecdotal evidence that different companies have been taking vis-a-vis this the theme of customer centricity and digital innovation. And to do that honors, we have Riddhi, who is exceptionally digital marketing veteran, and she has got about 17 years of experience, and she's a master's in management from IIM Lucknow, as well as a short duration course from IIM Bangalore. And most importantly, the kind of experience, I think she's almost like a born with a digital marketing kind of thing. Like I said, out of 17 years, almost about 15 odd years, she has been with this field. So you can imagine the fact that she must have grown with this topic itself, like as and when the digital marketing has come to the fore. So before she was with currently she's with TCS, and before that she was with Accenture for almost about 6 years, and where she was the general manager for digital marketing. And currently, like we mentioned, she is the global head of digital marketing. And most importantly, what she has been doing is, she is transformation and innovation programs in TCS. And she has been instrumental in the 1.4 billion growth in TCS brand value. Through her experience, she has also crafted search and social media strategies, which have led to transformation journey of how retailers, FMCGs, travel, transport, and hospitality industries operate today. And as you can imagine, the kind of expertise that she brings in, along with that, the kind of impact that she has created in this wonderful company. And I'm sure, like I said, you're going to have a great learning evening with Riddhi. Over to you, Riddhi.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chaudhary. Very kind of you. You make me feel magnanimous, very huge, which isn't the truth. A simple fry in the ocean. The reason I'm saying fry in the ocean, very contradictory, is because there's so much more to learn. And I really want to thank the opportunity of yourself, as well as the Times Media Network, Nandita, everybody else who reached out and who's given me this opportunity and platform to connect with all of you. I hope this next 60 minutes are I wouldn't say enlightening, but I hope there's some takeaways for each one of you, and there's something that you all can learn from this. I can't say that I can pack my 17 years or encapsulate that for the next 60 minutes, but I will certainly try bringing in my perspective, a very individual perspective from all that I have learned so far. I would have loved to have this engaging. Presentations are generally very boring and very challenging, especially on a video, it's even worse. But then given the fact that this is how, I do realize that we're all learning and we're all growing in this field. It's going to be a monologue for some time, and then I would break for certain questions, which I will take at the end of the presentation. Is that a fair deal, Dr. Chaudhary?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen, so please let me know once you're able to see.
Yes, absolutely perfect.
Cool. I'm going to change this a bit. Okay. All right. So welcome all again, and we're going to talk about customer centricity. I absolutely echo and agree with what Dr. Chaudhary had to say, that this customer centricity is quite an abusive word. It's become even more abusive during pandemic, unfortunately. But the fact remains is that a lot of organizations, big or small, business entrepreneurs, etc., all they're trying to do is focus on their customers. This has been per se the backbone towards developing any industry that we're looking towards growing. And if this is not looked at, it becomes extremely challenging to go back and say, yes, you want to grow. So growth for either one of them is only when you're focusing on your customers. Interestingly, there were certain topics of discussions in sure why this is not working. Yeah, that we're going to look for. So I am going to talk about customer centricity. There's no doubt in that. I'm also going to talk about what's going to make or what's the customer success guru mantra. The life cycle or the journey that we say, and in many organizations we say the value chain, but basically we were just going to make it simple by saying what's the customer success journey. What are the innovations and how is it that people and businesses are driving this through digital technologies? And of course, the whole building blocks and the 5-step roadmap towards this customer-centric organization. So it's going to be I've just divided this into various bits and pieces towards which helps towards this topic. The first one, the foremost one is it's not surprising for me, but I really wanted to bring this out was a lot of businesses believe that their businesses have been set up or their organizations have been set up with customer in focus. So they're extremely customer centric. Having said that, the bubble or the myth needs to break right here because it's when you speak with the customer, it's only then you realize that about 30% of our consumers are focused at. And in fact, when you speak with the customers, they feel completely left out. And it's not surprising because generally when we come into the market and we have, and when we're looking at market, I'm looking at both globally, locally, geographically focused, all of them, right? Our intention is always push a lot of content, push a lot of information, push a lot of details, push a lot about every information possible about your product, your service, your capability, but never realize that what is it that the customer really wants. And here is where the whole idea from a product centric to a customer centric really is the shift that we need to focus towards now. The other thing is also that there are a lot of organizations which think that this can be bottom up. Unfortunately, it's got to be top bottom, right? What I mean by saying that is our C-suite also needs to be involved and passionately move towards a hand in glove movement where we're really talking about what is it that the customer really needs. And you would actually see that with organizations where when you look at certain interviews by the CEOs or the top executives, you would see how they've changed their narrative. They've changed their focus about going like it's saying this is what we have to offer versus this is the product that we have versus this is what we understood our customers want. And a detailed amount of research and investment goes behind the scenes of understanding what a customer and a commitment is required for that. That commitment then, of course, goes back and trends into marketing our campaigns. And this one's close to me because I end up doing that for my organization. Everything that my organization speaks or whichever company that we're associated with, it's important to go back and be able to communicate or articulate this back to our customers that we're in for you. We're not in for ourselves, but for you. And together we need to grow and transform the way we're looking at businesses. And when I use these words, which is growth and transformation, again, something which is loosely used, we really need to find value. If I have to just put in simple words, it's the value that you need to drive for your customers or your customer's customer, which really talks about customer centricity. It doesn't really stop at whom you're serving. It really starts at whom are your customers serving. And for that, we need to go back and make those changes. Technology will always be a backbone to everything that we're doing. I would not deny that I was pretty amazed on saying that why would a manufacturing unit where we're building cement would need technology, or why would any other industry which is not technology dependent in our balance would require all of this? But you'll be quite surprised to see that technology really helps us make those quick changes, and it changes the ecosystem and it changes the way we are operating. And that's another change that we're going to talk about through customer centricity. And of course, employees, which are the focus, because they are our brand ambassadors. It's not going to be somebody just sitting in a chair or in a cubicle and making decisions, but it's that person on the ground who's going to make a daily conversation with our customer to be able to express and indulge in having conversations, which really brings out value, right? With that being said, I just wanted to give you an example of what a customer-centric business model looks like. Sorry for the smaller screen if it's not too clear, but I can probably share the deck a little later. But what really happens is there are two parts of the market, right? There's a developed market and there's a market that you wish to penetrate. The reason I'm saying wish to penetrate is because we're not classifying the developed or the undeveloped market basis financial reasons or the development basis technology. It's basis our reach in those markets. It's our reach in those markets. So we've got certain developed and mature markets, and then we've got markets which we've yet to go back and create our tentacles in there. In each of this, it's a very clear, simple approach. We don't necessarily have to complicate things. I'm of a belief that the simpler you make things, the better it's understood, and it's easier for a customer to relate back with you. It's easier for a customer to trust on you. It's easier for a customer to absorb things with you, right? So the minute you go back and you start talking about too many jargons, too many business models, too many things which are going to be afraid. I mean, sometimes it can get quite intimidating. They can get afraid. And here is what I thought I should share that it's very simple to go back and actually create. The first thing that needs to be done is create relationships, right? Your relationship with the customer is most important. That's the foundation, right? That's the basic layer towards working towards customer centricity. Um, I'm not sure of how many of you heard this or learned this, but relationships drive organizations. Whether it's an employee supervisor, whether it's an employee customer, whether it's customer customer, but it's relationships who drive all of these organizations. And that drive helps you grow exponentially. And I'll walk you through certain slides a little later for you to see the correlation between the two. But it's also to go back and see that what is it that they currently have, right? The whole design module is to go back and say, are we even collecting enough feedback or are we being extremely sporadic? Are we going back and we're looking at their journey, or are we just going back with a bent of mind that this is how it is and this is what needs to be done? We're being extremely judgmental on how our perception about a market or a customer is, and I'm talking about both market and customer. Are we being extremely judgmental about it, or coming with preconceived notion because ancestrally this is how it used to work, or 5 years ago this is how my customer model used to work? So are we re-looking at that entire value chain? Are we also looking at metrics? And data plays a very, very important role. I can't emphasize enough to say the amount of data that we need to look at with various cuts of technology actually helps us penetrate deeper towards what our customer really needs. The infrastructure, of course, is goes without saying. We need to constantly keep innovating. We need to constantly check that whether any of the services, our technology backbone, are they really serving the need, or do we need to let go of the ancestral or the ancestral ecosystem or technology and look at new ways of operating? Once we've developed all of this, it's called the run of the mill, and for me, it's called as a factory model. The whole idea is to go back and run, scale, grow, and transform this entire business to be able to create that kind of change that we're looking for. I'm not going to deny the fact that yes, it's going to be baby steps in the beginning, but to go back and be able to execute this change, it starts right from the leadership. So on the far right for me, and probably left for you, but on the far right of the slide, what I wish to say is that this change is only possible is when your executives are all aligned to this entire model. It's going to be extremely challenging because many a times, and here is when I'm going to come with my personal perspective. When we talk to customers who are trying to solve their customer problems, many a times these conversations are boardroom conversations or conference room conversations, which are generally led by middle to senior level management. But the decision of whether this project and the way we're approaching towards a challenging statement is ideally taken by the C-suite. There is an executive sponsor who goes back and signs off and says, yes, this approach makes sense, which is where I keep reiterating the fact that your entire organization has to be aligned towards a customer-centric model, vis-a-vis a model or a solution that you put towards anything that you're going to go back and present your customers. What's also important in, I don't know, sorry if it's my slide alone, but it's also important that how do we measure customer success, right? And do businesses really need this? Um, to measure customer success is it's almost many a times in my world I go back and I say that it's an English term, right? Because for me to measure success is not just a CSAT score. To go back and it's actually going back and penning down to the T and saying what was my customer's objective, what is it that they wanted, and to pen that down, believe you me, it takes oodles amount of time, right? There are many customers who would come back and say, yes, I would like to be like the Amazon, or I would like to be like a Best Buy, or I would like to be like a Marks and Spencer, or I'd like to be like an Etihad Airlines. Sorry, these are just retails and travel industry that I'm talking about, but I'd like to be, let's say, Holcim or Lafarge as a cement company, or I'd like to be somebody like a bank in the banking insurance companies. They already have a competition or a benchmark that they have it in their head. But when you go back and you drill down further and you ask them, what does that mean? And that's where the challenge really starts. That's where we really need to pen down what is a customer success, right? It's not becoming an Amazon. It's not becoming the best company as compared to your competition. It's what really is going to work for your organization as well as the customers that you're serving. Hence, laying down the objectives are the first most part of your success. The second, like I said, was again extremely focused, which is relationship. Because at the end of the day, when your company goals and your customer goals are aligned, that's when you start working together. If they're not aligned and all you're going to be thinking about that this is what I need to sell, and they've bought the package or they've bought the product or they've bought the service for me with me, fine, it's okay. I don't need to retain them. Let me just get in the market and penetrate and acquire as many customers. Acquiring a customer versus being centric towards a customer are two different things altogether. What we're really talking today about is customer centricity, which means I've already acquired the customer, but now I want that customer to be with me. I want that customer to be retained, and not just be retained, but actually go back and say that he is my choice of partner or he is my strategic partner. The word partner really starts from being centric towards your customers. Do businesses really need all of this? And today the answer is yes, right? Actually, not just today, forever the answer is yes. It's one, so it's like your hunter versus farming rule in our marketing parlance, right? I mean, am I going to hunt for an account or am I going to farm an account? Hunting needs different skills and farming needs different skills. But do we need both towards looking at our customers? And the answer again stays yes. But is it the same person who ends up doing both of them? And the answer is no, unfortunately. Many a times it's the sales teams who go out to the markets, who go back and who position various capabilities of things that we have to offer. And it's seldomly that they're the ones who are serving them. They're not the ones who are serving them. And here is where we see a switch, or here is where we see a dip or a fall. And hence that need of going back and saying that, give me a moment. And here is where we would go back and want to go back and realize that once you've acquired a customer, it takes a lot more effort, but a lot of less money to keep them retained. And the only thing that keeps them retained is the value and the relationship. It also is one of the most important growth driver for an organization. It's pointless to keep creating new customers in your database, but not be able to grow with them and not help them grow. It's important to go back and mix both of them. What's important, and as per Gartner studies, is also see that the value that you give to our customers, right? Constantly that I'm saying that the value that you give your customers, but it stems back to the fact that You can only drive value once you know what they really wish to achieve, and which is where the objectives really need to be called out. Sorry. The next one is to go back and say, what is it that really, how does a customer success really come to play? And here is where we're looking at three parts, and I've tried to make it simple. The entire renewal process, right? Most of the organizations, when they come, when you start positioning yourselves up in the market, you have a lot of information to share. Obviously, because you're the owner of the product, you're the owner of the software, you're the owner of anything, of any services or any capabilities. So you know it best. But do we all do a good job of articulating or expressing that over to our customers? And maybe not. Which is where sometimes, and of course, there are limitations about which channel am I positioning this, am I in the right place or not, where my customers are, etc., etc. Which is where the best way to go back and make the customer believe in your product is when you make them experience your product, when you make them experience all the capabilities and everything that you have to offer. I have a personal story. I used to believe that, many times it's the entrepreneurs and budding entrepreneurs, actually, to be specific, who win over us. Win over us in the sense, win over giant companies like the Accentures, the TCS, the Cognizants, and the Capgeminis of the world, because they have a lot of agility. They have a lot of newness and freshness to serve. And they're pretty nimble. Having said that, what I then discovered, and that was like I said, it's my personal story, is it's not just about what you have to offer, but it's also the kind of experience you give to your customers whilst you're offering your product and service. So when you go back and you look at for free trials and free models or things in terms of how can you leverage your product in the most effective manner, the fact that I would be more inclined towards an organization when they let me play around with it, when they let me go back and understand what is it that I can do to make it customized and be very sure that, yes, this is the right stuff for me. This is the right stuff for my organization. And here is where, again, the whole idea about seeking value and giving that value to your customers and engaging with them consistently wins that battle or wins that tug of war. Organizations invest a huge amount of money in innovating, in developing, in creating, in curating a lot of products, a lot of services, a lot of capabilities. But that is one set of the problem. The other part that happens is you're constantly renewing this entire value or a business outcome for your customers to go back and say, yes, we have to make this even further to see that, yes, this is going to be exactly or like a perfect fit model for your organization. The next thing that helps is reducing churn, right? We definitely have a TCV or a fully signed contract when we get into organizations to work with or partner with. But what's important is to go back and understand that what's the first minimal viable product that we have to offer. If this is not going to be something that's going to be iterative, which means that we're going to be constantly improving it through the journey in our time, then we've really lost our battle. We've really lost the customer as well, because they may stick around with you through the contractual duration, and maybe that contract is just about a few months, a year, a few years. But eventually they realize there's so much more that somebody else has to offer, only for the simple reason that somebody was constantly iterating their product for fitting their need better and driving a better value, and hence we've lost them, right? The intention is to also go back and continuously monitor any red flags or be actively using data to see how is their customer changing. For example, when we build a product, we generally say that it's going to get launched and we're going to have an MVP stage 1, and then we have the agile methodology, and instead of the waterfall, and we go back and say, okay, we're going to be constantly innovating. We're going to be looking at, 2 years down the lane, we have a product which is ready to serve you. But what's important is that in those 2 years, my customers' way of behaving and engaging with me have changed, right? Because you're looking at you're being so product centric that you were focusing everything only towards developing that product or mastering that craft and launching it to the market. But little did you realize that you were to invest time in going back and looking at your customers and how have they changed or evolved. Have they really gone back and now they're sticking to the same thought process, and are their challenges the same as yours that you had started your journey with? Most likely the answer is going to be no. In fact, what's going to happen is you'll be quite surprised to know that we actually look at our data. And when I say data, I'm looking at my customer's customer after every month to go back and see how are they constantly changing in terms of their engagement with us. Is their behavior different? Is the segmentation of my customer different? Is a person that I'm reaching out as my target audience different? And these are all my red flags to go back and say that my product is not meeting the need that I had really started my journey with. Instead, I need to go back and change. At the end of it, of course, we need to drive revenue. That's most important. And that needs to be viable, right? The whole iterative process can be quite cost ineffective. And that's because you're constantly changing the way your product is supposed to serve our customer. And here is where you need to also be mindful and wear that hat or the finance hat of saying, is this profitable for me? Is this viable for me? Because at the end of the day, there are always going to be some technology glitches or certain investments that we will need to do to go back and make that product viable by the time it gets launched. And and keeping that in mind, what we would also need to do is create opportunities for an upsell or cross-sell, right? Because it's within this product that you're going to be launching and driving your entire growth and partnership for not just yourselves, but your customers, right? Because that's where our focus is. Our customers are more important. Hence, we're designing those products for them. But during that entire course, you have gone back and invested or reinvested in a lot of things to bring out the most viable product. But if you don't go back and know that 6 months down the line, if there's something more I have to sell or I can sell, then I'm not going to be able to sustain me as an organization. And that's where your profitability or your cost needs to be looked at, how you're going to be positioning that product. But of course, it provides mechanisms to go back and say that these are also capitalizing them, not just from ourselves, but also for them, right? Because when you change and you bring something different for your customers, they are also giving something new to their customers. So the constant thing of being changed is important, is also going to be playing a very important role here. Very simple, but this is something which all of us know. You don't even have to Google it. It's just known that that's the customer journey that one really has. It's the adoption, retention, expansion, and advocacy. But what's different is at each phase, there is a different buyer journey. And there's a lot of things that needs to be designed and developed specifically to this place. So for example, there are things that I need to do during the adoption, right? And the adoption means this is a stage where, and I'm sure you all know, is a stage where we're really looking for people to absorb us, for them to understand our product, for them to come back and actually buy our product. But then once that's done, of course, there are things that need to be done even before we reach the adoption stage in terms of awareness. But by the time we reach the adoption stage, we want them to continue being with us. And the constant feedback of how are we doing? What are we doing? Are we even doing it right? And I would put them in a very clear marketing rule as to 5 W's in H, which says, are we doing this correctly? What's happening with it? When should we be launching this for your customers? Constantly gather all of this to deliver more and more products which create value is where your retention phase plays a role. But then retention could only go a certain way or a certain path, and that's where expansion starts to play a role, because at the end of the day, you've committed to help them grow and transform, right? Growth for them, transformation for them, actually then helps you grow. So it's a first commitment that you make not to yourselves, but to your customers. And where you understand that how do you expand? So do you expand locally or do you expand globally? That's the difference, right? And here is where you understanding your customer, which goes back in terms of saying constantly looking at your customer and being focused towards them is where you understand your customer and say, yes, this is what really needs to be done in terms of your mini or your baby steps. And when you've built that relationship, this information comes to you or reaches you through a collaborative effort. That collaboration that's primarily happening between the organization, the customer's customer as well, uh, where they're coming and they're sharing this information back with you and saying, this is what's really working or this is not what's really working. We need to go deep in data and understand the intelligence that's going to drive this product for expansion and make very clear objectives and lay down their entire path of customer journey, path to purchase, if I have to say, to go back and say, this is what's going to work. Obviously, the end goal is the advocacy. Who wouldn't love the laurels of going back and saying, yes, they've been our strategic partner, or they've really partnered with us to go back and say, they've really been hand in glove with us, and we've been able to see transformation and growth. Now, these are sentences or words which are music to anybody's ears. And here is where we go back and see that there are times where we actually look at how do we develop an advisory board. And we've gone back and we have concentrated on such towers within the organizations where their whole job is to go back and understand from our customers that whilst you've adopted us, whilst we've helped you grow, we've helped you meet your objectives. Are you really looking at us as your partner? And if not, where should we go back and enhance ourselves or better ourselves? And if yes, what is it that really worked with you? Which was those five things that we did with you? What really clicked? And it could be a combination of all five, or it could be a combination of or it could be just one reason. But that really helps me go back. That learning helps me go back and absorb in all the other industries and verticals that we work with, and which is where we design the whole customer community. Because seldomly does one vertical or one community, let me call it vertical, right? Because that's how we call it in our organization. So seldomly does one vertical talk to another vertical. What they do is, if there's a retailer, one retailer will talk to another retailer, or one FMCG will talk to an FMCG to know, okay, what is it that's working for you all or not working for you. But a retailer would not look at it a travel industry, or a travel industry would not look in the banking industry. But our customer advisory board brings in all the best practices, the learnings, the things that we've done to go back and be able to convert this customer from somebody who started the steps with us and is actually going back and advocating us. What is it that we should also do to go back and leverage technology? And this one's going to be very dear to me. I come from a tech company, and we continuously keep looking at how do we harness this relationship. We did not really do this very well until a few years ago, I have to be honest. We are the number one tech giant company in the world now. But did we do this very well? We did this, but we never really called it out in the market. But what is it that we really invested in? We invested in our CRM platforms, right? It's important for me to know whom all am I serving, so my customer database. What am I serving them with? So what are my capabilities, my products? Am I doing something different for them? How much am I doing for them? What's the value that I'm driving for them? How long am I associated with them? All of this and many more other questions, and believe you me, there are over thousands of questions when I input in my CRM database to go back and understand the golden profile of my customer. It's extremely important to create a golden profile, because if I don't know my customer inside out, I'm never going to be able to constantly innovate and help them grow. So my CRM platform is my first moment of truth with them to begin this journey. The second one goes without saying, that your digital analytics or your analytics played a very, very important role. But here is where I would differ a little. This analytics is not going to be restricted only to the organization you are serving, but it also needs to be shared with who you're partnering with. And the reason is, constantly when you go back and you share your analogy or you share your change of approach to help them grow and transform, it always needs to be data backed. It cannot be a perception based solution, right? So many a times when we have solution architects or we have SMEs who walk up to our customers and says, we've done this for another customer, we've done this for another customer. Well, you're bringing in loads of information, but you've not looked at us as in my data, and you've not really looked what's really going to work. But the minute you power that back with data which is working for them and what's going to work for them, and constantly tell them here is why you need to change through data, the entire value is looked at completely differently, right? There are, of course, algorithmically intelligent capabilities that have come into play. We're driving that in the organizations because there are many a times that when we are serving our customers, we end up doing a lot of repetitive, mundane tasks, which many a times can get boring. It can get, and I'm not talking about automation, please. What I'm trying to say is that algorithmically, I'm able to predict what is it that my customers would want, will serve them, and not just serve them, will make me a differentiator to what others are doing in the market, right? And this plays a very important role because at the end of the day, you have to again constantly teach your algorithms to read new data time and again. You can't just develop something and push up in the market and say, oh, that's the new app and here's what we've launched and it'll work for you. But it'll work for you for the next 3 months or maybe 6 months at the most or a year. But if you don't constantly change your app the way algorithms are need to be tweaked, you're not looking at your customers again. Of course, cloud-based technologies are imperative because gone are the days when we have huge data servers just in one place, and you need to ensure that there's data and security. And most importantly, the data is talking to each other, right? We should have data, and of course, GDPR rules and compliances play a very important role here because data of one country versus data of another country can it be shared? Can we understand what's the customer sharing with us, etc.? But then cloud really helps us play that role of getting a single view and that golden customer profile that I spoke of. We are looking at leveraging solutions which are only enhancing the customer experience. Because for this, what it really takes is, at the end of the day, it's constantly going back and innovating your products, which means there are times that the organization's really not gone out and experimented with somebody else. Instead, what's happened is you're investing a lot of money, effort, resources to create an experience. But at the end of the day, that innovation or that experience is only built within a cocoon, and you need to explore that. But to reach that level, there's a huge amount of investment that goes behind the scenes for an organization to be able to create an experience for yourself. So sometimes, and I'll give you a simple example, and I'm going to make it historical. When all of us had bank accounts, the fact that we had a checkbook or we had to go to our banks, right? I remember my parents would go to the bank almost every day or at least once in 15 days to go back and update their passport, to withdraw cash, to deposit cash, etc. You look at our generation, we've actually gone beyond ATMs, right? We've got Google Pay and we've got UPIs and we've got all the APIs to go back and say, how do I transfer money from one place to another seamlessly? If you see today, if we did not constantly look at how are we creating that experience for the new age generation, there are organizations who left all of that behind, and as a result, they've had to leave that space of being able to serve the customer and not be in that market anymore. So it's very important that we constantly look at experience. But all of this is only possible if we're able to work collaboratively. Because at the end of the day, if you look at these 6 or 7 buckets that I've tried to segment them, if any one of them are not going to talk to each other, are not going to work with each other, are not going to share information with each other, are not going to understand the objective, and are not going to work towards a common goal, all of this is kaput. All of this is going to fall flat, and none of this is going to work, right? So collaboration is a success mantra, which many a times, and I've seen this with an organization, said, one tower is in silo and the other tower is in another silo, and the silos are not allowing people to talk to each other, seeing data, and the golden customer profile, right? I mean, the classic example. You just cannot get them together if you don't have teams working together. You don't have teams coming and saying what is it we should be providing. Of course, there is simple method to this madness, and I don't call it madness because I think it's a very scientific and a very clear-cut approach of how do we create this roadmap towards being a customer-centric mindset. You need to commit on around what is it that your customer needs and address that challenge. So the first part that plays a role towards is identifying the commitment. And the reason I'm saying identifying the commitment just means you've understood what they need and you're going to commit towards serving them. The second most important part is understanding their entire data to be able to operationalize and hence lead them to a transformation. So if you see there is a journey within the journey, there are three very important words that I've used, right? Understanding the data, to be able to operationalize, which means I'm going to execute certain things, to then make the entire leapfrog approach of helping them transform to newer heights is the second commitment that needs to be done. The third is constantly reimagine and imagine the customer experience. We shall fall flat on our face if we say that, okay, clap, we've launched the product and it's good to go, and we can actually sit back and roll up and sleeves and enjoy and have a party and say done. We don't need to innovate anymore. But that's why this entire mechanism, and which is why I said the factory model of constantly churning out things again and again to serve the experience really needs to be a part of your roadmap. What you really also need to do is reimagine the way you're executing, and which ties in back to your operational excellence. To going back and saying, if I'm not going to be collaborative, I'm not going to be talking to all the stakeholders, all the towers, I'm never going to be able to achieve a customer-centric organization. And of course, the idea is to design for employees, design for customers, and give a full view or a 360-degree view or a holistic approach. You can't build a product or a service or give them or give something or offer something, not give something, sorry, offer something which is not going to help or which is going to help just a part or a segment of whom you wish to reach out to. Having said that, there are going to be challenges. There are always going to be challenges, and these locks are going to differ 6 months down the lane. So if you're going to ask me this question 6 months from now, my locks are going to change. I definitely today need to be outcome based. It goes without saying. Earlier, I remember when we used to sign contracts, it used to be the amount of dollar value and the amount of transactions or the amount of things that we're going to do for you, right? Our KPIs. But today, all the things that we're going to be signing and we're going to be agreeing with our customers is what is it that I'm going to help you achieve? It's the outcome-based model that we're going to be doing. But to doing that, the accountability and the understanding of what is it that your customer wants is extremely important. Second, access to real-time data, and here is where collaboration or working in silos really plays a key role. Not just organizations or let me put it this way, not just people, but it's also technology. There's one technology that's not talking to the other. And as a result, the whole idea of, when you're not getting a single unified view of what the data really wants to speak out, you'll end up making decisions or end up making changes to your products, which is not the correct view because you're seeing it in silo. And why are you seeing it in silo? Because your technology is not talking to the other one, or one platform is not connected to the other, or your towers are not connected. So whether it's people, process, or technology, all the three, which I call this PPT for me, all the three need to collaborate and work together to give me real-time access to data and constantly innovate. The complexity is only going to keep increasing. Today, what I needed at a snap of my finger, tomorrow I want in the blink of my eye. Unfortunately, pandemic has created that sense of urgency or the sense of privilege, if I have to use the word, that I should have it first and I should know it first. As a result, it's important to go back and say that, are we looking at the complexity, the diversity, the things that are going to make things even more challenging, and creating a product or innovating a product constantly basis on that? And of course, we need to deliver remotely. So irrespective of where are we situated, how are we situated, what is it we position, we're able to deliver this. And of course, our service delivery network, right? And it's many organizations who work with this model. We were able to constantly deliver value. But this whole thing rests on one important fact: the always on mindset of your customer. Right? You cannot drop your hat or a ball saying it's done. Like I said, right? It's a constantly evolving and constantly always on model that needs to play that role. There are innovations that are very customer specific innovations that are being led. But before I reach to certain case studies over here, and I'm not in the interest of time, maybe I've taken too much, but I would want to walk you through certain case studies. Is that before we reach there are questions that we try to answer to go back and say, is this really an innovation, or are we just saying that an enhancement is an innovation? Many a times organizations go back and they say, oh, a small change or a tweak or an enhancement is an innovation. No, it isn't. We need to clearly understand the difference between the two. But questions like, are customers really liking our product? Is it doing things differently and better for them? Is there an updated feature that's really changing the game for them? Are they recommending our product because they're loving it? Or it's just that the whole experience is different? Or is it something new? Right? All these questions are going to go back and help me answer in terms of innovation. And what really happens is I'm going to make a very simple diagram of understanding what really brings this innovation cycle. So the first one that really works is innovation part of your life is bringing together diverse backgrounds and perspectives towards the technology and towards the processes to help you drive a change, right? The minute you're not able to tick that box, you know that you're not going through the digital transformation. Because the minute you're working in silos, the minute you don't have real-time data, the minute you don't have things which are looked from not a single whole side view, you're not going to get a perspective right. You also need to go back and foster the entire customer centricity operation and transformation. So driving to your culture, right? It cannot be a Riddhi who can sit in one room and go back and say, I want to innovate, and I want to change, and I want to go back and have a very create a unique experience for my customer. I can't do that. Instead, the entire organization that you're working with and working for needs to have that mindset, which is why the always on mindset again plays a role in saying, I want to constantly change and innovate. It's also important to go back and say that, are we looking at principles towards fundamentally changing the way we're running our business? And the reason I'm using the word, and this is a strong word, which many may not agree with me, but here is where my difference of opinion lies. Principles are those that are helping you run the business. But you can only run your business innovatively if you're constantly updating your principles. I'm not saying change and let go away of principles. I'm saying updating your principles. And where is again the value that you bring on the table is what really helps you drive these innovations. So there's an inside view, there's an outside view. There is a very, very inside view again, which basically means as an organization, retrospectively, if I have, and there are reviews, which all of us go back and fall prey to and saying, okay, we've got a review with the organization to say, how well did you do for your customer? We've gone away with those days of saying, oh, I've helped you generate so much of income or so much more money. Instead, we've started to talk about, this is the kind of business value that we've been able to deliver. And you, like I said, right, you listen to a lot of these, the CEOs or the C levels of huge organizations, and you will see whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Pepsi, whether it's TCS. We no longer are talking about just numbers. We're actually talking about the entire experience we've been able to deliver for our customer and the kind of business we've been able to deliver, right? So an outcome-based model. But having said that, numbers are always numbers. Of course, we're going to be looking at that. And how are we going to be constantly being able to produce all of this is by reducing our cost, increasing advocacy, and acquiring more people and retaining more people. But it's important to understand that the way today organizations are looking or measuring the success of customer centricity is not just your dollar value, it's the kind of value that you're creating. These are some of the examples that I want to walk you through. But one thing that what stuck with me was Stitch Fix, right? This was actually, and I'm sure it's there in Harvard Business Review as well, and a lot of other case studies when we go through certain courses. I remember a few years ago, and this is a few years ago, right? The whole idea of shopping was very different versus now. It's different now as well, right? A lot of online shopping versus being able to see whether it's going to be the right fit, right match, right product, etc., etc. But imagine if I had to completely outsource this to somebody else. The fact that an app is able to identify who I am, and when I say identify who I am, not just as in terms of my name, but my preference, my likes, what is it that will fit my budget, what is it which would flatter me, what is it that will work in my environment. So if I'm in India versus if I'm traveling globally, can I wear something and will that attire fit? Imagine knowing all of this and being able to serve you a set, or rather some clothes in a box, and say these are your five completely paired or a full blown attire, and choose and see. And the moment somebody is able to pick up all of that information, fit it to the T for you, or of course there are people who would return a lot of these products and saying, oh, I did not like them, but not just return them, but through that take that feedback from your customer and saying, okay, this is not what Riddhi likes, this is not what she's appreciating, and hence we need to change what we're serving her. All of this, the entire personalized stylistic experience through an app was seamless. Um, there are a lot of companies and budding entrepreneurs today in India who are trying this model. It was in fact started with two girls. They started this Stitch Fix concept, and they're now into multi-million dollar organization. But what was interesting to see is that the whole thought that I need to decide what I need to wear vis-a-vis somebody's already doing that piece of work for me, and I can concentrate on something else because I'm not very good at it. Can this thing be also outsourced? Was quite different, right? Um, the other example that I had of Wayfair, and that's personally intriguing for me, is because imagine the number of products that they had. They had about more than 8 million products. And to go back and say that I'm going to be creating a personalized experience for you is not an easy part, right? Looking at over 15,000 customer journeys and using predictive models and artificial intelligence and analytics, all of this was then enabled to power what is it that my customer is looking, and actually within 3 clicks, I'm able to discover the right product at the right time. And obviously, this means that I'm going to pick up that product, and that means sales and revenues for the organization. But behind the scenes, it's not an easy task to look at these number of products, the number of customer journeys, to be able to absorb all of this and create that seamless experience for the customer and be able to create that kind of persona journeys. With that being said, like I said, it's the customer acquisition versus the success. What really is the difference is how are you looking at the customer success versus what is it that you're trying to do as acquire. Both of them are very important, but both of them are different roles within the organization, a different journey, if I have to use the right word, within the organization, and both need to be looked at. The 3 building blocks for this entire transformational journey, it's important, and sorry that I had to skip that slide, but then that's it's getting combined here, is to go back and aspire on what is your purpose, right? Going back to the same question of what's the purpose of driving that transformation. Being able to transform that through small steps, through cross-functional activities, through governance models, through deploying right measurement metrics, and I'm using the word right measurement metrics, right? A lot of people will come back and say, this is how we measure our success, but then they may not be the right ones. So you need to constantly check on that as well. And all of this to be able to do what? To be able to produce journeys, to be able to produce products, to be able to produce business models and services to meet the customers, right? H&M today, if you see as an example, they've actually invested so much towards a customer centricity, that instead of me constantly buying new t-shirts, I can actually go into the Loop, which is a Loop store, and pick up, and with the same t-shirt that I was wearing, throw it in the Loop machine, and I have a brand new product, right? Now, this has allowed them a completely new model, a business model. What it's also done is it's gone back and it's changed the way they're operating. So it's important to go back and understand that whilst we have a purpose and we're enabling all of this for the transformation per se is very different. Here is an example of how a product-centric versus a customer-centric, right from the strategy, and that's the pyramid, right from the strategy to the operational structure plays a role. It combines everything that I've spoken for almost an hour, but the idea is to go back and say, whilst we're focusing on how your product needs to be constantly changing, innovating, and serving the needs, it has to be correlated towards this customer. It has to be in conjunction with, if this is what I'm doing for my product, are they really being aligned to my customer centricity? So I shall take a pause here and hope this has given you some food for thought and some information which you may not have had. And if you have had, great, but probably reinstating what you already know.
Thank you so much, Riddhi. Absolutely interesting. I think there are a lot of takeaways and quite a download on both, the customer centricity as well as the customer-centric innovations. And especially, I think the two important takeaways for me and I'm sure for most of us are the customer-centric mindset as well as how do you develop that customer-centric organization. I think which is the most important one. I think where you have clearly demonstrated the customer-centric organization structure as well, which has to come from top down. Very interesting. And we have a few questions. If it's okay with you, we can with your permission, right? So the first question is from Mr. Loganathan, and his question is, to your corporate experience with the digital marketing, what do you think has worked for you in the past and what has not? What do you see the marketing metrics 5 years from now? Thank you, Loganathan. Very interesting.
Yeah, I like the question because it's a very rhetorical question when somebody says, "What are you going to see 5 years down the line?" I think we're in the era where I can't see 5 years down the line. I'm in that era where I have to constantly keep seeing. I have to constantly keep innovating. So I'm taking the second question first. So if you have to ask me that am I somebody who has a vision to go back and say 5 years down the line, this is what's going to happen? And the answer is no. Because my customers are constantly changing, they're evolving, they're behaving differently, they're reacting differently. So there's no way there's going to be any metric for me to evaluate that this is what's going to work and this is my measurement of success. I can only do it together as a journey with them. And that can only happen if I keep observing them and I keep knowing what to do. So that's the second part of your question. The first part, what's worked and what's not. In the digital marketing area, a lot of people assume that at the snap of a finger, things are going to change. You call for an organization, you call for either a tech giant or even an agency, and you would start saying, oh, I've spent about $1,000 or $10,000. And just because I've launched something like today and tomorrow, I'll start seeing results. There's nothing called a sweet success, which isn't a snap of a finger. You have to constantly keep empowering our customers with information of not just your product and services, but what's the value you need to generate. Because like I said, right, there's one part which is acquiring the customer and the other part is retaining them. And if you mix the two or you forget either one of them, you're going to fall flat. So what's not worked for me is many of them believing, or many marketers, I don't even want to say the word digital marketing, many marketers thinking, well, I've done my job of going back and pushing my content out in the market, and now it should all work fine. But that's not true. Because your products has not changed. The way you're communicating to your customers have not changed. And you're expecting results at a snap of a finger without really investing in them. I mean, what has worked without investment? Absolutely nothing. So why not invest even during communicating and reaching out to your customers? So that's one thing which definitely doesn't work for us is not waiting or not looking to invest and understanding it's going to be done in jiffy.
Thank you. So we have the next question, which is a little fairly long, but it's a very interesting one from Mr. Ashish Moitra. And his question is further, please give your honest opinion with respect to customer-centric orientation. Considering the dynamic aspects of ethnocentric, polycentric, and regiocentric orientation for marketing and sales for developed and developing markets, which aspect is creating more disruption? Is it digital transformation or digital marketing in the present era of a data-driven economy? Thank you, Ashish.
Ashish, I love your question because it seems that you're probably working somewhere to have nailed this down. Like I said, right, the organizations are always working in silos. The towers are never collaborative. And unfortunately, to get the marketing team, the sales team, the product owners team, everybody who's involved in it, to look at a single objective and drive that is going to be a constant challenge. It's not going to be easy. If there's any person in the world or organization who says, "Oh, it's all hunky dory and we're able to do it seamlessly," hats off to them. Right? Super surprised. Wouldn't want to believe. But then if that's what they have to say, and like you said, you want my honest opinion. Your honest opinion is we're yet to reach. All of us are yet to reach in that space. With that being said, uh, I think there was another part to your question, which if you could repeat for me, Dr. Chaudhary, saying,
Which aspect creating more disruption, digital
yes,
transformation or digital marketing?
for me, both of them are hand in glove. You cannot have digital transformation without marketing, and you cannot market something if you don't have transformation. So it can't be either and or. You have something, you have to market it. You can't market if there's nothing, right? So for me, it can't be either and or. It's going to be both hand in glove, and it has to go together. So for me, that's how I look at it.
Wonderful. So we have an interesting but very small one from Mr. Sham Shah. His question is, good evening, ma'am. How digitalization is impacting a big ERP software, like SAP? What is the future of it? Thank you, Sham.
See, the future is definitely bright because of the simple reason that organization is going to invest. They're changing a lot. They are wanting to go back and innovate and reach out to a customer in a more simplicist way. Uh, like I said, right, many of us take a lot of pride in saying making things complex, but then that can also be pretty cumbersome and pretty daunting to our customers. And the minute you have an offering or a product where you're able to simplify and create answers towards their challenges, the absorption rate goes higher. I think they're in that journey and they're reaching there. They've realized that and making things simpler is easier and better for them. And it should be bright towards them if they're constantly changing the way they are.
And next question is I think is a clarification, from Mr. Sunil Joshi. His question is, what do you mean by deep user intelligence?
Oh, that's a nice one. Deep user intelligence is basically looking at every form of data that I get offline, online, through all channels, through all ecosystems, through every path of my journey with my customers, right from the awareness, forget about the acquisition stage, right from the awareness till the person or till the customer with me at the advocacy stage, right? While I've bucketed them into three or four major segments, but the amount of data that goes towards every part of this, like I said, both offline and online, is my deep user intelligence. I can't just look at my website alone or stand alone and say this is what's happening with my customer and this is how they're behaving with it, and hence I should drive my transformation in a particular manner. No, I can't do that. Instead, I have to see what are they doing otherwise in the store. What are they doing outside? Are they using an app? And from the app, they jump to a website. From the website, they jump back into the store. And if they jump back in the store, are they looking at a product? And they're looking at the product, what are they doing differently? And I can say the same thing for a ticket, right? For Belgium Rail. I mean, I remember doing this for a ticket. Somebody's at a kiosk versus somebody's picking it off the shelf versus somebody sitting in and downloading an app and booking a ticket through an app and is a one-time user versus somebody who's a repeat customer. Imagine the amount of data that's being punched in. All of this data, there are different ecosystems that host it, that have it. They don't talk to each other, and hence the user intelligence never really comes up. But if I combine all of this, and then I see the power user, how is it that my customer is behaving? That's deep user intelligence. I hope I was able to answer.
Thank you, Master. And this is again a fairly long question. This is from Mr. Amol Nigam, and his question is: in a B2B business where eventually the end consumer is at a skip, and the customer whom we are dealing with has the power to change concepts, practices, models at their level, which may not be necessarily for end consumer enrichment yet. Just for the sake of being more competitive or more convenient, short-term goal like a price advantage or while going down on quality, how can we use as a first provider of the good or service cope up with that and keeping the best customer outcomes in mind?
Sorry, I did lose you on your question because it was fairly long.
Yeah,
But if I have your essence right, see, reducing costs or compromising on quality is never going to be a win, because what's going to happen is you may end up buying something which is a little cheaper, but eventually you realize it was not worth it, and you shall never invest it, and neither would you go back and relate again to anybody else to go back and buy. What you really would need to do is create a more cost-effective solution, so that tomorrow you don't really invest in something which is cheap. There's a difference between, and that's where English plays a good role. There's a difference between a product being cheap versus being cost-effective. There's a difference between somebody being able to leverage technology versus saying, I'm a tech guru. There's a difference, right? So one needs to constantly change and see how can you make it for the customer, but not compromising the values that you have to offer. And that values is not just for a product, it's also for your service, it's also for the experience, it's for everything. So the minute you lower your costs, you're going to actually hit the entire journey. The entire value chain of your customer is going to change, because you'll always think about costs. You'll never think about the experience, right? To create an experience is investment of time. Forget about money, investment of time. So everything requires investment, and that's where my change of cost being more cost effective and doing it differently or innovatively will play a role. Not sure if it answers, but that's what I made sense of your question.
very good. Now, this is, I think, a very important question for TCS. And this question is from Mr. Jagdish Tambi. And his remarks are, thank you for the interesting session. My questions, TCS has revolutionized passport services in brackets PSK in India. And his questions are two. First question is, what are the other value services being provided to regional passport office organizations? The second one is how the services have helped to upsell your services within India and the external government bodies, with a few examples, if possible.
You're asking me a quite controversial question, because you're technically telling me to tell you how are we partnering with all the others. So I can tell you, I can actually share only what's available in openly available. We have done a huge amount of work with Passport Seva Ketra, right? And there's a huge amount of pride in TCSs the minute we hear passport. I mean, imagine when we used to go, and I remember when I had to first get my passport done, it would take me about a month, right, from background verification to getting it done through your police to everything. But today, the entire process, right from collecting your documents to actually taking your photograph and then submitting them and the entire process of application. The front end also, the person who's collecting is all done by TCS. Besides the back end work of technology, everything, even when you enter the Seva Kendra, they're the TCS people, right? They're not the passport of the government people. They're TCSers. They're sitting on TCS desktops. They're using TCS software to populate all of that information. And they're collaborating on all the remotest area. So I no longer have to go to a passport office. I'm actually sometimes also going to a post office in a regional area to be able to just get my passport in less than 2 working days. Now, for me, that is scale. For me, that is technology. For me, that is being cost effective and being innovative. I don't have to create an infrastructure such as a passport office where I need to collect documents. Instead, I can go to a post office and I can submit all of this, and I have a TCS ecosystem plugged in right there, and I'm able to get my passport in 2 days. We're doing oodles amount of such things with a lot of organizations, a lot of government organizations across the globe. I did talk about Belgium Rail, but imagine there's so much more we're doing with all the others, right? Which is where I can't share that due to confidentiality, but you can believe me, passport's not going to be the only sector within the government section. So we have a whole vertical called as the government services within TCS. Our job is to look at various governments globally, and of course, priorities India, to go back and say how are we serving them and how are we being a differentiator. No wonder TCS today is not just looked at as a brand value from a monetary standpoint, but from an organization where we're able to give back to the society in the form of how technology is leveraged to make things and do things differently. We don't only donate a lot of money, but we end up doing a lot of work for a lot of organizations, which empowers them to become partners towards a more strategic and a growth-led operations.
Thank you. Now, this is the next question is from Mr. Neeraj Kumar. We are in an era where digital journey is not an option to do better business, but to survive in this fast technological change era. How do you manage customer satisfaction, managing their disruptive IT landscape with least IT investments and expecting best performance? Thank you, Neeraj. That's a balancing act.
Yeah, it's interesting. Least IT investment and balancing act, right? See, I would say you in your roadmap, right? So first of all, have your objective clearly defined, and you can ask the moon. There's no harm and there's no wrong in asking for the moon. But when you do that, it's also important to understand that to reach the moon, you've got to take steps. And here is where you have to be extremely honest and practical to yourself that what is it that I already have and I can live with. Not every time I really need to become I have to bring a whole tech stack to enable something to be, or to do something in terms of my first baby steps. I don't have to, which is where through least amount of investments, I have to do that first check to understand where are we, what can we do, how much can I change within your existing environment or ecosystem to reach to the next level. But from there on, yes, we'll have to take the leap of faith, right, of investments. But that doesn't mean that I always have to invest. Our first point is always to check what we have. Are we doing that right? Is that meeting your goal? Is it meeting the objective of a customer? 90%, like I said, even Gartner said 70, but I would say 90% in my experiences, we don't look well internally. We don't look well within our customers to go back and say, you know what, you already have so much going in for you. You've got the best technology. You're just not talking to each other, or you're not making the most use of that platform. Use the platform inside out, and you could have created so much more, right? So that itself is a step in enhancement, right? Without really investing. All you did was you looked at the process. All you looked at was you looked at how do you leverage that platform, that service, or the product better. There's no investment required. But are we doing that first stage? And most of the answers are no, because we are so heavily focused on selling. I want to sell something new. I want to sell something different. Change that, right? See internally, and I think that should be your first step when you're not investing and you're able to make the change.
Great. I think we have quite a few questions, but with your permission, because we've already overshot the time by 15 minutes, Riddhi, if it's okay with you, can I take 2 more questions with your permission?
Yes, you can.
Great. So we have the last but one question is from Mr. Akshay, and his question is: how do we address customer centricity in times of within inverted commas, quote unquote, the great resignation? What can we do about the huge scale of resource crunch that is making it so hard to deliver service to the customer? Thank you, Akshay.
Akshay, I think they're 2 independent questions, right? If you went through what I did share through my presentation, I always said that it's the organization that's helping you towards the customer centricity. While there are people in the organization who drive it for you, and that's why the brand ambassadors play that role, your centricity or your value of how you're going to drive that for your customers is always going to play an important role versus then somebody resigning and going. Resignations are inevitable, right? If you're going to come and tell me that forever I'm going to sign my contract in blood and say I'm going to be in for an organization, it doesn't work like that, right? Because we all have our dreams, our aspirations, our needs. And sometimes the organization is not able to deal with that. With that being said, just because my organization is not able to serve me doesn't mean that my organization doesn't have the value and the vision or the model or be set up for any new induct to come back and run that for me, which is where the scale or the operating model or the values and principles play a role. So it's not making me dependent on the person, but at the same time, it's not losing what you've invested in the person. You would always want to retain people, but there are many times when we're not able to serve them. We're not able to serve their needs. And it's absolutely fine when we're not able to serve them, right? We've got to be realistic. But if there is never going to be a churn, I'm never going to imbibe fresh blood either. So are you saying that I should lock my doors to fresh blood? Then I think my ancestral people are never going to move out.
Absolutely. I think that's where the people come, people, process, and technology, the continued business continuity. The last question, Riddhi, with your permission, is from Sikaresh Saha. And this question is, sometimes digital or online retail actually becomes barrier for customer experience. In India, what's your thought about the online versus offline ratio in bakery or cake retail?
Interesting. I'm a foodie myself, so I would give it from my personal point of view, right? It's not something that I would say just from a digital marketing perspective. See, online versus offline, there's a huge change since the pandemic, and I'm talking about specifically for India. Um, People were comfortable outside because obviously technology was different and people are comfortable. But I won't say that they had completely absorbed the online forums. Um, One moment. Sorry. But for something like cakes and pastries, right? It's going to be interesting because I can't taste it. I can't taste it online. But the moment I'm able to create an experience where I'm gonna highlight that if you walk into my store or if you buy this through or an online purchase, here is what I'm going to give you differently, or here is how I'm going to make it customized to your palate. I'm going to probably reduce the amount of sugar you want, or I'm going to probably, and let me take an example of Stitch Fix, right? They're looking at what I love, they're looking at my behavior, they're looking at my pattern. In an online forum, if I'm able to go back and give them that experience of, you can go back and change your base from a maida to an atta in your flour, right? Or if you're going back and you're changing just the way you're presenting in terms of not just the cost, but also the deliver, but also the way you're packaged, also the way how different that whole product is vis-a-vis your competition. All of this is possible the minute you're able to articulate this back to a forum online. If you're not able to articulate it, you're just going to launch saying that it's a cake or it's a pastry or it's something which is good, which is just good looking, but not what's different. Then obviously it's going to be run in the mill. There are 10 more other retailers who are serving, or other, there are 10 more other boutique shops that are serving very different cakes and pastries versus yours. So then you'll just have to wait for a word of mouth. But the moment you're able to launch differently by saying, I'm able to change maybe the ingredient, or I'm able to change maybe the way it tastes, or maybe the way it's delivered, or the way it's packaged, there is an opportunity. Because today people are ready to experiment. This was not what it was 2 or 3 years ago. 2 or 3 years ago, the fact that somebody would go back and order food online without even visiting the restaurant was fairly remote, at least for India, right? I would always want to go back, taste the food, and then think, oh yes, that's the same place I want to order again. But for a new bakery shop, I'm ready to experiment today. So India today is experimental, and you should actually latch onto that bandwagon.
Thank you so much, Riddhi. We could have asked for a better narrative on this very important topic, and we started with this little myth about this being one of the most misused words. Because I think quite a few books have been written. I remember when we were talking about customer experience, right? I think customer service and customer experience, there's so much of difference. And we know, something like SQC Singapore, which is behind Singapore International Airlines Plus, and it is also behind the chief architect of customer experience behind some of the airports, including Hyderabad International Airport, GMR Airport. And all these people definitely, like you rightly said, when you have showed us the beautiful, experience journey, and they actually meant it, right? One is that, like you rightly said, one is a physical shape. Yes, it's one way of doing it, but then when you're talking about the digital space, when you're talking about multiple touch points by the same customers vis-a-vis even a day, and then you can multiply with different days and different months and different the locations. It's all the more important. But thank you so much for sensitizing and bringing such an important topic to the fore. And then I'm sure with all of your great experience, this has been wonderful to everyone here, and we continue to look forward to you. And sorry that we had to bother you for extra time as well, but absolutely pleasure to host you, Riddhi. Amazingly insightful.
The pleasure is all mine. I'm sad that I didn't get an opportunity to talk to them or see the people who are there today.
Maybe very soon we'll be hosting you physically sometime very soon. We should be looking forward to that, Riddhi.
In pleasure is all mine, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to connect.
Pleasure all ours. Thank you so much, Riddhi. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.